Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I'm back to talk about the White Lotus Season 3 finale on HBO Max. The episode is called Amor Fati, and there were some high points, some definite low points, a lot of predictability, and then a couple of twists that I most definitely didn't see coming. My initial reaction, I think this season could have been 6 episodes instead of 8, and I don't think the finale needed this full 90 minutes. There were some parts of the season that they definitely could have compressed a little bit more and still told us the same story. And that said, Mike White told us along the way basically how this mystery would unfold, what would unravel. The fact that Chelsea in nearly every single episode alluded to the fact that she was probably going to be involved in something bad. Your fate is what it's going to be. I mean, Mike White could not have been more clear that Chelsea was going to die, and in fact, she did. Along with that, the Guy Talk and Mook storyline, the robbery, some unnecessary things that I don't think needed quite as much tension building to get where we ended up in this finale. But before we get more into this, please go ahead, like this video, hit that subscribe button, especially if you like videos like this where I talk about TV shows. I've got lots of coverage coming up this week, starting with The Handmaid's Tale final season. I will be covering that weekly with reaction and reviews. And there is a new series coming to Apple TV Plus on Friday. It stars Jon Hamm, and it's called Your Friends and Neighbors. It's a drama that leans into the comedy. Jon Hamm gets himself caught in this deadly web when he gets fired from his job and decides to start robbing his wealthy friends and neighbors. So be sure that you tune in for those other shows that I'm going to cover, along with others coming throughout the year. Now that The White Lotus is over, let's move on to some other shows together. Okay, let's start with the Rick and Chelsea storyline. I kept wanting more from this story. I thought it was really interesting when we got Sam Rockwell in the story, when him and Rick were in Bangkok scheming this kind of failed scam that they were trying to pull off with basically zero research, no forethought, and I'm pretty sure that both Jim Hollinger and Sitala could see them coming a mile away. We did finally learn that Jim Hollinger was, in fact, Rick's dad. Not unexpected at all. I think that thread was woven throughout, but it was kind of giving us the vibe that, yes, he was going to end up as his dad, and he did, and it just all kind of came too late. But what is most interesting about the death of Rick and Chelsea for me is the fact that Chelsea had talked a lot about them being the yin and yang to each other's existence. And that visual of them after Guy Talk ended up shooting Rick and they ended up floating in the lagoon, I was so unhappy that Chelsea ended up face down. Rick ended up face up, smiling, looking at the sun. And the way that visual was with one facing up, one facing down, really gave that yin and yang portrayal to me in a very visual way. But I was so sad for Chelsea, seeing her being the one facing down in the water. She had a good heart. She was trying to fix Rick as a project, I suppose. And even when Rick said, the plan is for us to be together forever, I never sensed that genuine emotion from him. Like, Chelsea gave so much to this relationship, and Rick really never reciprocated that. And that was clear even in the end. Yeah, he told Chelsea to go away, but she didn't. She wanted to be there for her man. And you know what? That ended up getting her killed. It was not shocking. Throughout the season, as I mentioned, she kept alluding to the fact that bad things come in threes and something bad was going to happen. Chelsea kept alluding throughout the season, giving us a clue in almost every single episode that she may end up meeting her maker at the end of the season, and she did. Mike White told us this. The same with Guy Talk and Mook. Now, Mook is my least favorite character from this season. How dare she try to change Guy Talk? I mean, it's essentially like Chelsea and Rick, right? Chelsea trying to have Rick as kind of a project, a fixer-upper. Mook is doing the same thing to Guy Talk, who pushes back with his religion, the fact he's not a violent person. He even tried to quit his job because he sensed that he was not the right person for this. But his boss says, go and think about it. And once he heard the gunshots, he did spring into action. And Sitala is telling him, kill him, kill Rick. We all could see that coming or not. And Guy Talk ended up actually getting to be a security guard and in a relationship with Mook, but I actually think it's a tragic storyline for this character because he's compromising his morals. He's doing what somebody else wants him to do, not fulfilling what his personal dreams are, his goals, and what aligns with his religion and spiritual beliefs. So for me, that was a big disappointment. And we could see a big conflict coming this whole time. I mean, it's been a big story with Guy Talk's character. So this was another thing that felt pretty predictable. I wasn't surprised to see it play out like this. I was a little bit surprised that he ended up not ratting on Valentine and the Russians. And for me, that whole robbery story in general was kind of a throwaway. Yes, it did end in Guy Talk having to make a difficult decision on what to do and is he going to throw these people under the bus or not. But Guy Talk ended up on the side of non-spirituality and doing something that was not genuine to his character. And you know what? So didn't Belinda for that matter. So these two characters, even though I think, we could probably see their resolutions coming the way we did, I was pretty sad for both of the characters, despite the fact, Belinda's got all this money, but she's the new Tanya. She has fully closed this loop now where she's the one that promised something or, she's only known Porn Shy for like a week. So not a lifelong promise, not someone she's known for a long time, but the disappointment we saw on Porn Shy's face when she said that she's going to be leaving the island, that was really disappointing. And he's kind of the new Belinda now, which makes me wonder, are we going to see this character in season 4 potentially? And is Belinda just going to sail off and actually be happy? Is she okay with the decision that she allowed her son Zion to make? Now, Zion, we did not get a lot of this season, but I think that he really performed in this episode. He's like, go big or go home. This could be your moment. I mean, he wants his mom to end up, being a millionaire. And it was really smart for her to negotiate for that money because let's say she did not take the money at all or even just took the $100,000. I don't think that would have been satisfying enough for her to keep that secret for her entire life. And I kind of think that Greg Gary actually respected Belinda and Zion for negotiating like that. And when it clicked for Belinda that she had to play along, exit the room, make it seem like her morals were compromised, that was really smart, and I did not see that coming. But I'm curious to know, will she end up being the new Tanya and somehow end up dead? Or were her and Zion sailing off on that boat in the distance? Is that the last that we're going to see of them? Or will Porn Shy come back into the picture somehow? What do you guys think? I would love if you dropped a comment and let me know. I mean, I'm not saying I would have taken the money, but for some people in life who may want to try to elevate themselves, I can see why you would make that decision. And I can definitely see why you would negotiate for more money because let's face it, it is a really big decision. And I think it makes it less likely that Belinda will ever go back on her word and end up reporting Greg Gary, who just also gets to live happily ever after. We've now seen this character in all the seasons of The White Lotus. He's there with Chloe, and Chloe's still trying to recruit guys for him. So I think we can assume that he lives happily ever after. Whether or not he stays with Chloe, I don't think really matters, but it was kind of sad to see Chloe listening to Chelsea and all this talk about soulmates and romance when she is kind of stuck in this superficial relationship that will never have the type of depth that Chelsea felt she wanted, deserved, or maybe even had with Rick. So it is kind of tragic for Chloe, but I think Greg Gary is going to just kind of keep getting away with this and probably will never see him again. And that makes me wonder again, will Belinda be present moving forward or not? Will they use that similar formula with the character carryover that we've seen? Not sure. But I guess we'll find out once season 4 does come rolling along. So the fractured friend group, not quite as fractured anymore. Something I appreciated most from this episode was the personal revelation that each of them had. I mean, Jacqueline to an extent, but mostly Lori, Carrie Coon's character. When she gave the speech to her friends about the fact that she doesn't need religion in her life to make it meaningful, that time is the meaning, and spending time with these friends is like looking in a mirror, and they've known each other forever. She tried a job, she tried a relationship, she tried parenting. Those things didn't bring her joy in life, but even though there are some problems with these women who she's known forever, who truly see her for who she is and vice versa, that felt really powerful to me. Having that extent of a personal revelation, I was really happy for that character, but also for Carrie Coon's dynamic performance, the way she delivered that. If we're talking about Emmys for the White Lotus cast, I think Carrie Coon should definitely be up there. For me too, though, Parker Posey was fantastic. I'll get more into her in a little bit and the Ratliff storyline. Aimee Lou Wood as Chelsea was also one of my favorites this season, which hit hard that she was lost. But again, because there was so much table setting for that character death and Rick's character death eventually to meet, the fate of this tortured type of soul and her getting sucked into it, that was kind of predictable. But I didn't actually expect Lori to come around the way she did, especially given everything that happened. Perhaps it was her night spent with Alexi because she felt a certain way about him having approached her about the $10,000. When she was watching Kate and Jacqueline in the pool the next morning, she was getting emotional. And for a minute, I thought she was jealous, maybe that she wasn't down there with them. But the more I looked into it, it was like a light bulb was going off for her. She realized that these people are some of the most important in her life and do give it meaning. And I hope that for anybody who's experienced that sort of lapse in friendship or disconnect with people because of the people who they've become and maybe are not anymore, at the core of it, those relationships from when we're young will always have a very deep meaning, and it makes me more introspective and look towards some of my older friendships and relationships and think, you know what? Maybe I've discarded the fact that there was more meaning in that in my life as a whole, similar to how Lori kind of came to see this. So I felt for the friend group, which did feel superficial at times, it was a good resolution. And then to see them on the boat on the way home, them both comforting Jacqueline, which I assume her husband is probably going to end up leaving her, but also they just went through this witness to a shooting. The way Carrie Coon ran off from that and kind of left Kate and Jacqueline in her dust, you can tell she meant business. She's like, get me out of here. It took Jacqueline and Kate maybe a minute longer to kind of get away from that, but the trauma of that shared experience for them as a friend group, I think will ultimately end up bringing them closer together anyway. What did you guys think about how the fractured friend group, or maybe now not so fractured friend group storyline resolved? Did you want more? Did you feel this was satisfying? For me, this was maybe not my favorite storyline altogether, even though at the beginning of the season I felt the relatability factor the most. The way it worked out, I really liked it and it felt authentic. Now I am curious to see what will happen to Jacqueline when she returns. Did anybody get footage of her dancing at the club? Will her little tryst with Valentine end up coming out? The way they all kind of ignored him at the table when they were having breakfast made me think now they've really put their friendship ahead of all of that stuff. And they had a couple of difficult conversations. And like Jacqueline said, you guys see me not just for my superficial flaws, but for my real flaws inside and the way I am. And I think she came to actually appreciate that sort of critique because let's face it, I personally would rather have my friends and loved ones be honest with me about things, even if it's a difficult conversation. I would 100% always rather be told the truth about how people feel than share information with me with rose-colored glasses because you're afraid of hurting my feelings. That is never the way to go. I'm personally an open book and I try to be quite honest with people as well, even if things don't always come out the right way. That sentiment by Jacqueline of accepting her for her true self, her true nature, and being able to communicate that even if it wasn't necessarily in the best way by Lori. The truth is always the best way to go, especially in real friendships. And this trip actually, for me, solidified their friendship. I'm not unhappy about this one. Moving on to the Ratliffs, there's a little bit more to unpack here. From the beginning of the season, I thought Jason Isaacs was just killing as Tim Ratliff, but his character ended up being quite one-dimensional once he did enter into this lorazepam haze, which we did not need all of that throughout. We could have done less. We completely understood, yes, he is taking lorazepam and not in his right mind. We saw all of these dream sequences where he was envisioning killing himself, killing his family. And with the suicide tree fruit, that's something they introduced back in the first episode. That was another thing that they essentially told us was going to come into play directly. They would never have mentioned that if it was not going to be important. And while I didn't have on my bingo card that Tim was going to use it in a smoothie, it makes sense. Saxon was making smoothies the entire time. Lockie was someone I did not expect to die. And of course, he did not. I thought he did, and that was a really good twist. It was predictable that Tim was going to do something to his family, and the irony of it all is he was trying to exclude Lockie. Lockie was the only one who said he could survive not being rich, but now that we know Lockie is a self-admitted people pleaser, he was just saying that to make Tim happy. He probably could not have survived not having all of the money, despite the fact that he allegedly wanted to go to this Buddhist monastery with Piper, even though I don't think he really necessarily wanted to do that either. He wanted to please his sister. He is the ultimate people pleaser. And can we talk about the fact that he knew exactly what he was doing when he decided to jerk his brother off? Are you even kidding me? Well, you like to get off, Saxon, so I thought I'd help you out because you were sitting there looking lonely. I mean, twisted AF. I thought he kind of forgot it when those visions started coming back to him when he was meditating, but no, he knew exactly what he was doing. And for me, that is like the most disturbing of all. And a surprise for me / not surprise was Piper not wanting to stay at the monastery. I thought she was sold for a little while when she was there and got upset that Lockie wanted to stay. And she's like, hey, you can let me mess up my own life, but I don't want to be responsible for messing up yours. And I thought it's because she genuinely did want to be there and didn't want somebody else kind of stealing her thunder and going on the same path that she was trying to forge for herself. Well, turns out the girl could tell the food wasn't even organic, and I mean, come on, the entitled, spoiled brat of it all. And the look on Victoria's face when she came back and admitted this and started crying. Victoria was so pleased with herself. And you know what? She actually knew her daughter to a T because Piper was not cut out to be there, despite the fact that she wanted to be. However, Piper did have quite a revelation, realizing that she is, in fact, a spoiled brat princess. The real tears surrounding that. So yes, she did have a revelation. It wasn't exactly as we thought. She didn't end up at the monastery, but the character growth for her was pretty solid. And same with her brother Saxon, who was the most detestable character on this entire show at the beginning, but his character arc could not have been stronger. Patrick Schwarzenegger just absolutely nailed this role. And the fact that Chelsea, who is no longer with us, and actually makes me wonder, is Saxon even going to find out that Chelsea did not survive? I hope so that way he can mourn her properly, or maybe not, and he can sail off and have a whole new life. Now we know the Ratliffs are not going to have money. I can't even imagine the horror when they all opened up their phones, the looks on their faces, the way they looked up. Maybe it hadn't quite sank in yet. I expected maybe a little more devastation, especially from Victoria. But the fact that Saxon was reading these books that Chelsea recommended, I have hope that he will be able to overcome the situation that they are in, and he's not going to revert back to his old ways. I think part of Chelsea's character arc was influencing Saxon, a person that at the very beginning she did not even want to give the time of day to, but in the end they had some really tender moments, and I just appreciated the way that Chelsea influenced Saxon, who was probably one of the hardest characters to change. That misogyny, just the ick of it all. And for him to transform within 1 week, I mean, talk about character growth in a positive way. Unlike Guy Talk or unlike Belinda, Saxon was the least likely I expected this from, and could not be happier to see his character hopefully moving ahead in a better way and breaking this generational cycle that Tim has put them in, and the Ratliff family in general has always been a part of. As Victoria said, it would be an insult for them not to have lived the life they lived like the kings of old with all of their wealth and privilege. I mean, get out of here. Victoria is the one I am most worried about going back, because they made it the biggest deal that she would not be able to survive at this point in her life without this wealth. And especially after Piper had that revelation as well, I think the Ratliff women are going to have a much harder time than Saxon and Tim, who seem to finally accept things. The fact that he knocked those pina coladas out of their hands, which, by the way, they could tell something was off, and he's like, oh, the coconut milk was off, the coconut milk was off. But also, the fact that he wanted them to have pina coladas in their room and then excluded Lockie, I felt there was something very fishy about that, and the looks on their faces, they could almost pick up on something. But when you're on vacation in Thailand on the last night having pina coladas, yeah, Lockie's not 21 yet, and I don't advocate underage drinking ever, and don't ever let my kids drink. They're much younger than this, however. But I still maybe would have considered letting him have a sip under controlled circumstances with his parents. So the fact that he wasn't allowing that, there were some fishy things going on there. And the fact that he didn't wipe out the blender, and the fact that Lockie decided to then the morning after make a smoothie in the blender, which he wasn't really into smoothies, but again, people pleasing, trying to turn into more of a man, like Saxon mentioned, you have to make yourself a man. I go between the fact that suspending disbelief and he just took the dirty blender, but he doesn't strike me as a dirty person. So it does make me think he maybe wanted some of that alcohol taste because he felt left out, and that's why he did it, which of course I lean more towards. But for me, I'm never making anything in any blender that's dirty, even if it has residue of alcohol. Maybe my mindset would be different if I was younger, if I was a teenager, but just ick, gross, nasty. And at the same time, if Tim was so concerned about not poisoning his family, why would he have not have dumped out any traces of poison that were left in that room? So those things didn't really quite add up for me. I'm glad that Tim Ratliff had the revelation to not kill his family. I mean, I think that would have been extremely tragic. When he found Lockie there, passed out, vomiting in the back, for a minute I also thought Lockie was going to be the body that was floating in the lagoon that Zion encountered. I think we can assume that those bodies were probably the really crappy bodyguards of the Hollingers who basically did a really terrible job protecting them. But I thought Lockie was dead, so I liked that dramatic tension and suspense. I did not expect him to open his eyes again, to see those monks as shadows when he was having this kind of dying sequence moment with God before he actually ended up coming to. So that was a surprise. I did not expect him to open his eyes and come back to life, and the relief for Tim when that happened, and the fact that his family is never going to know that he poisoned them. I don't know that Lockie will put two and two together, that there was poisonous fruit in the blender. So that's something that Tim will have to sit with. But I think that's in a good way, because it shows that he did the right thing and he had some growth as well, despite the fact he was in this lorazepam haze. And the actual performance of Jason Isaacs, I think, went downhill throughout the season. Now, don't get me wrong, I love him as an actor. It was a lot of fun watching Tim Ratliff play this kind of unhinged dad on the lorazepam. But at the same time, I guess I just wanted more than the same repeated dream sequence over and over again. And that's another example of something I think that could have been achieved in less time in this season. I firmly believe this could have easily been a 6-episode season. I think some of these storylines were definitely more drawn out than they had to be. But that said, there were some very satisfying ends. There was quite a bit of predictability. But then some of the twists, like Lockie being the one to consume the smoothie in a great twist of irony, and then actually waking up when we thought he's dead, that was a lot of fun. But the whole Russian thing, like them getting away with the burglary, it just kind of bothered me for guy talk. I hate seeing somebody compromise their morals. I think we should always be proud of who we are and stand up for that and never try to change for somebody else. And Mook's character, get out of here. You are the worst person in the White Lotus. Fantastic actress, love her. I think she's great, beautiful person, but not a beautiful character. Mike White did a great job creating those unlikable characters. And then a character who we've loved since we've known, Belinda, who then turned into the Tanya of it all, creating this full circle payoff and callback to prior seasons of the show. And again, I am quite interested to see if they will continue that thread or perhaps bring another character back for another season. I had said before, I kind of hoped that Saxon and Chelsea would somehow end up together and maybe we'd see them traveling the world at another White Lotus destination in future seasons. But now, obviously, that's off the table. Aimee Lou's character, Chelsea, is dead. And she was another fantastic addition to this show. I loved everything about her. And while I don't necessarily think she is as Emmy-worthy as, say, Carrie Coon or Parker Posey, just props to her overall. I loved her character as a whole and am so endeared towards every single thing she said about believing in true love and this balance and just the tragedy of it all, seeing her floating face down at the end there. I mean, it literally gutted me, and that was something that we did see coming, so yes, it was predictable, but it still hit the emotions hard. We did get to see a little bit of a payoff as well from Sam Rockwell's character, Frank. He was praying at the end. Of course, he had that big night of shenanigans with Walton Goggins' character, Rick. And Goggins was okay this season, too. Was it an Emmy-worthy performance? I don't think so. I think Sam Rockwell's monologue was fantastic and so out there and something very unexpected and also quite disturbing, maybe. But also the honesty of it all and the character arc for his story as well, right? He started out, went through all of these different life affirmations when he started living in Thailand and had these various sexual situations happening. And to then see him participate in all this debauchery when, you know, Rick allegedly didn't and did stay true to Chelsea and was happy to see her when they went back and had that moment of shining in the sun. And then Frank, we see at the end praying in a monastery or praying somewhere. So he had a full circle story as well. I would have liked to have maybe seen a little bit more Sam Rockwell because I think overall that scam that they were trying to pull was very unresearched and pathetic if we're thinking about con men. I mean, could you have pulled off a worse con? Probably not. And it ended up getting Rick dead. Now we know where the gun came from, the gunshots, both from Guy Talk, and the gun that Rick did take from his, now that we know was his dad, Jim Hollinger. So it did bring us right back to where we started. I think Zion, the first character we met, ended up being kind of a shining star in this episode, and I wouldn't have minded more with him either. So again, will we see more Belinda and Zion potentially moving forward? What would your choices be if we could propel one or two of these characters from the White Lotus Season 3 into a future season? Definitely drop it in the comments and let me know. It seems like Mike White does like to weave these threads from season to season. I'm curious to see which characters could be returning for the 4th season of The White Lotus and also where it's going to be set. We have been set in Hawaii, in Italy, and now Thailand. So what beautiful destination will we get next? Most important question of all, how would you rate this season? For me, season 1 of The White Lotus is probably always going to be my favorite. I would rate this second, and then I would rate season 2 third. Drop your rankings in the comments. Tell me your favorite character from the season. Again, for me, I do think that it's gotta be Chelsea. I was so endeared to her character. She was so sweet and just had a heart of gold, and the tragedy of it all, losing her, one of the most satisfying storylines, albeit one of the most predictable. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in to my White Lotus coverage every week here throughout season 3. Like I said, I've got other shows coming up, including the final season of The Handmaid's Tale, the new series on Apple TV Plus with John Hamm, Your Friends and Neighbors. I'm going to be covering Poker Face on Peacock, coming back for a second season next month with 12 episodes. I may do a finale video for The Pit on Max. It's been one of my favorite shows of the year. Not sure if the timing will work out or not, but if you haven't watched The Pit on Max, you've already got the streaming channel, so highly recommend, especially if you like medical dramas and you were a fan of ER back in the 90s like I was. Let me know what other shows you're watching, what you might want me to talk about this year, and thank you so much for tuning in. Again, all of the gratitude for everybody who stopped by my channel, liked videos, hit that subscribe button. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, and just appreciate you sharing my passion for talking about television. So, I'll be back again soon. Media Melanie, clicking off.